all these fun questions. So what are the most common resources utilized when researching ancestors in France?
So by far, the most common resources that we utilize in French genealogy research are the civil registration records. And before the advent of official government-sponsored civil registration that's universal for everyone in France, we also deal with parish registers, which were utilized as a type of civil registration as early as the 1500s and 1600s.
Really?
So,
wow.
Civil registration, government-sponsored civil registration, starts in France in 1792. It's the first country to implement civil registration, and these records are fantastic.
Yeah.
They give us information on an individual's name, their birthplace, their birth dates, and we get repetition of many of these key details in their later marriage records, death records that help to confirm and link a person over the course of their life. So, and one of the other reasons that we commonly utilize civil registration and parish registers as the go-to strategy for French research is because many of them are available online.
Yay.
Right? So many of the department archives have been working since the early 2000s to digitize their parish register and their civil registration collections and make those available online. Increasingly, those are also being indexed and made available through some of our commercial sites like Ancestry, MyHeritage, and some other websites that we're going to be talking about a little later today that are powerhouses for French genealogical research.
So if we have indexes that are not digitized, are they just going to be stored in individual smaller archives?
Yeah, so some of the parish registers and civil registration that it's increasingly rare that we don't have those records online, but when there are situations where you might run into a case where something has not yet been digitized, then we work with the department archives to try and access the originals. Or what's also neat about civil registration records is they were kept in duplicate. So the town hall created the original civil registration record, and then they sent a duplicate copy to the department archives. And there's a similar system prior to the advent of the archival system in France in the 1790s, where you have the parish priests were responsible to create a copy for their parish, and then they were supposed to send a duplicate copy to the registry of the High Court in their area, right? And those often and then ended up in the department archives after the French Revolution. So you have these duplicate copies. So if you don't find something through the department websites, you can don't despair. You can sometimes find records through the town halls and through working with those individual town halls.
Well, that would have been a lot of work for them to copy those, because we're not talking about a Xerox. We're talking hand copying these documents.
Yeah, so it's fantastic. We love them.
Yeah. Thank you to the French people who kept track of their records. This is good. Did we lose a lot during the Revolution in those time periods?
So during the French Revolution, there was some record loss of the previous of records from prior to 1790s, and prior to that would have been parish registers, right? There was a lot of persecution of religion in general, and certainly of the Catholic Church, and so you have the seizure of church property during this time frame, and part of that time frame is when we get the transfer of these records. So what's really cool is in France, in many other countries, in order to really get into the records, you have to consider the government side, and then you consider the religious side, and they're in separate archives, they're separate systems, separate approaches for accessing those records. In France, all of the parish registers from before 1792 are in the department government archives. And so you get a lot of great preservation of some of these records from that time frame.
Oh, that's nice. One-stop shop. You don't have to keep looking everywhere.
It's fantastic.
So, can you find most French documents online? Would you need to go access them? We talked about how a lot of them are digitized, but for those that are not, would you need to physically go there to get them? Yeah,
so we talked about the most common resources being civil registration, parish registers, right? Those are our go-to strategies. But those can only get you so far. And there's a host of all of these other types of records that you can use in French genealogical research, including notarial records, census records, court records, immigration records. There's all of this rich archival documentation that a lot of the time is only available on site. So while, yes, you may be able to find many of the French documents that you need to get the bare bones skeleton of your family tree and the genealogy and the relationships between individuals, to really put the flesh on those bones and find the stories of these individuals and these ancestors, we have a wonderful opportunity to do that with French archives. And most of those types of records, increasingly there are some things coming online, but a lot of them are still available only on site in the archives.
Oh my goodness. Do you need to be a French citizen to access them, or could you go there as a U.S. citizen and access records?
Yeah, so you can go as a U.S. citizen and you can access the records. When you arrive at the archive, they have their rules and their policies. Right, you can't bring in any pens. You can't bring in anything to write on the documents. Right, you have to be very careful, and they will give you a reading card. But then you are set to be able to access many of the records that are available at the archives.
I love that. And that's how we use our on-site researchers with Legacy Tree.
Yeah.
Because not everybody can or would like to go to France right away.
Well, I think a lot of people would like to go to France, but maybe they can't, right? This is maybe not feasible for all of us.
And so that's when we would send in an on-site researcher to get access to some of those documents, just to make a bigger picture for people of their family history.
Yeah, and to help with finding answers to very targeted research questions, right? I can think of examples where we have been trying to identify, was this person who ended up in Oregon and showed up under a weird surname that said they were from France, were they the same person as somebody in France who had a similar surname? And there are records that we can use, including succession records and the records regarding the division of property after the decease of an individual among the heirs, that tell where each heir is at the time of the division of the property, the mutation par décès, and those are available through the Department Archives and Series Q, and you can find some of those records that can give you insights into where the members of a family ended up over time.
That is beautiful. That would be neat, because then it does paint the full picture.
Absolutely.
For sure.